Welcome everyone. We are here to present a professional learning module on trauma-informed practice we developed. We have had experience with individual students in our classes with trauma. We recognized more and more students in school reporting different forms of trauma and identified the school did not have a clear and effective trauma-based procedure and are looking to change that through education. This module links to Standard 6.1 and 6.4 from the Australian Institute for Teaching and School Leadership, which are demonstrate an understanding of the role of the Australian professional standards for teachers in identifying professional learning needs, and demonstrate an understanding of the rationale for continued professional learning and the implications for improved student learning. This module has two activities. We will do an activity based on the practice framework and cognitive theory during activity 1. After finishing activity 1, we will move on to activity 2, which is based on the learning theory, social constructivism. The learning intention for this module is to understand and effectively use trauma-informed strategies for supporting students suffering from trauma. During this module, you will think about whether the strategies currently using are working effectively and why you think so. You will consider how the new strategies can be applied to at least one past situation, and you will discuss and share opinions with colleagues.
The trauma responsive practice that I'll be focusing on today is a framework created by the Australian Childhood Foundation called PRACTICE. PRACTICE is an acronym that details different aspects that we must consider when responding to traumatised children and young people. It recommends a variety of strategies that education professionals can administer to help our students thrive in the educational environment. The learning theory behind the activity linked to the PRACTICE framework is cognitive theory. The general capabilities referenced in the Australian curriculum that this activity pairs with are personal and social capability, as we teach our students to understand themselves and others and empower them to create and sustain meaningful relationships and the ability to learn. It also pairs with critical and creative thinking, where we equip our students with the tools to be able to evaluate their knowledge, ideas, and to seek solutions and alternative possibilities for issues that they face. This involves assessing their behaviours and dispositions and understanding how these contribute to problems and solutions. According to cognitive theory, learning occurs when students transform their understanding of concepts through discovering new information and explanations or adjusting old understandings based on new information. This change in understanding is stored in the memory. Cognitive learning is further enhanced by linking concepts to lived experiences and real-world examples, and allowing students to engage in group discussions based on the concepts. Through this activity, we will consider preconceived ideas we have about responding to traumatised children and young people and enhance our understanding with this new information provided today. This will be strengthened further by considering our lived experiences and our current and past students that could benefit from these strategies. I will now take you through the practice framework and detail what each letter stands for in the acronym, along with an example strategy that links to each aspect. We've provided each table with some post-it notes. As we work through the framework, I would like you to write down any strategies that you currently use that can fit into the 8 categories. At the end of the session, please pop up to the front and stick your post-it notes in the relevant section. We will collate all examples and create a resource of strategies to share with you all. Let's get into the framework. P is predictable. Traumatised children commonly experience any form of change as a potential threat. To reduce threat responses, we can create environments in our classrooms that are as structurally and sensorily familiar as possible. The strategy. Transition warnings can be used when there is a change in activity, for example, music or cue cards. R is responsive. Any response to a student's behaviour needs to be coming from a place of understanding for how the trauma is affecting their actions. Using discipline is not always the best option for these students. The strategy. Acknowledge their attempts to change their behaviour, not just any successes or non-successes to regulate their behaviour. A is attuned. It is quite common for there to be a detrimental disconnect between students and their own emotional and physiological responses when there is a background of trauma. When we become attuned to different patterns of a student's responses in different situations, we are able to assist the individual to make these connections as well. We can also act before the responses escalate. The strategy is to track students' feelings to make connections for particular times of day, classes, or activities that heighten or calm the student. C is connecting. To assist in the healing process, traumatized students need to reconnect with themselves, their feelings, responses, and strengths. We can assist this process by helping them to be more in touch with their feelings, emotional and physical, and their behaviours. The strategy is to help students develop an enhanced vocabulary about their feelings. T is translating. Often the process of building stories of understanding about their past experiences is hindered by the impacts of trauma. They need assistance to develop the ability to build these stories about their world and experiences and see the positives in their lives. The strategy is to have regular opportunities for reviews with the students on what they got up to during the day or their week, or just something as simple as asking them on a Monday, what did you do on the weekend? I is involving. Creating relationships with their peers is a particular struggle for those who have experienced trauma. Relationships are vital for their healing when they feel supported and cared for. The strategy is to develop social groups around areas of interest. C is calming. Traumatized children and young people are in a constant state of high arousal. They need to be equipped with strategies to calm their physiological and psychological state. We also need to provide them with experiences of calm in order for them to see what it feels like and what they need to try to achieve. The strategy here is to teach your class mindfulness practices. E is engaging. A fundamental aspect of caring for traumatized children is engaging them in relationships with adults. Appropriate and supportive adult-child relationships are vital for their healing and personal development. The strategy here is to identify 1 to 2 adults who have a respectful and supportive relationship with the student to act as their go-tos during the day. These individuals need to act as supporters, advocates, and mentors for the student and have regular one-to-one interactions with them throughout the week. So that is the practice framework in a nutshell. Take a moment to finish writing down any strategies you have before moving to the front of the room to place them on the board. We will then move on to activity 2 for this module.
This activity is structured according to the learning theory social constructivism. The focus is on trauma-informed practice strategies. Students with a trauma background have no power to choose their behaviours. This means that typical behaviour management strategies may be ineffective and potentially harmful to these students. So activity 2 explores specific strategies to help create a safe learning environment for students with a trauma background. Now I'll talk a little bit about the theory behind activity 2, which is social constructivism. So why should we look at social constructivism? As staff, you'll be a community of learners that collaborate and evaluate one another's ideas. By discussing prior cognitive experiences before receiving new information, knowledge and understanding will be constructed and reconstructed. This reconstructed understanding will be reinforced through practice. By applying the new information to personal and relevant tasks, the information will have implicit worth. So this is why we're looking at classroom experiences that you have experienced yourself and then applying the information to those experiences. Knowledge constructs are formed through communication between people before they can exist intrapsychologically. So this is why we're working in pairs for this activity. In a school-based community, it is vital that recontextualization of knowledge occurs collaboratively to structure the formation of cognitive knowledge. Okay, now we'll start activity 2. For part 1, I'd like you to form a partnership with a colleague and for 5 minutes briefly discuss the following. An experience where your usual classroom management strategies have not worked with a particular student. By looking at what is not currently working, we are looking at self-awareness, which is a personal and social capability under the general capabilities in the Australian curriculum. So why are these strategies not working? Let's look at what current research says. Childhood trauma results from a child witnessing or being involved in an event or multiple events where they feel threatened, such as bullying, disasters, violence, terrorism, grief, and sexual, physical, and emotional abuse. Students who are suffering from trauma often display challenging behavior in the classroom to mask feelings of distress. These students may appear withdrawn, aggressive, impulsive, defiant, inattentive, or hyperactive when in distress and trying to avoid painful emotions. There's a lot of research currently that looks at how the brain is affected by childhood trauma. The development of neurological pathways may be implicated by childhood trauma, including pathways involved in regulating emotions and coordinating behavior with cognition. Many traditional classroom strategies may be harmful to these students. Withdrawal from class, detention, and other strategies like these will reduce the opportunity for these students to form relationships and reinforce their negative view of the world. Let's look at what current research says. Trauma-informed practice strategies focus on helping students build self-regulatory abilities and increase relational capabilities. 5 core principles of trauma-informed practice include safety, trustworthiness, choice, collaboration, and empowerment. By establishing relationships that model resilience, establish trust, prioritize empowerment, and increase choice, complex stress responses may be diffused. So remembering that neurological pathways for students with trauma backgrounds may be affected. They may have elevated stress responses, so it's important to make them feel safe in the classroom to reduce this stress. To create a safe classroom environment that promotes learning, teachers need to reinforce positive behaviors by deliberately teaching, noticing, and celebrating the positive choices that students make. This will reduce negativity in the classroom as a whole, not just for students with a trauma background. To promote psychological safety, considerations must be made to avoid triggers such as lighting, seating, arrangements, visual or auditory stimuli, and other factors that create stress. So this comes down to knowing your student and what their triggers are. When misbehavior does occur, it is important to avoid placing blame and instead focus on the trigger behind these behaviors. So helping students build self-regulatory abilities by learning from their misbehaviors is important. Now we'll look at some strategies that we can use in our classrooms based on this research. So the formation of positive relationships that model resilience is vital between you and your student. Calming strategies that focus on emotional self-regulation is also particularly helpful. So this could include mindfulness activities or anything else that you see as a calming strategy. A crisis management response plan that focuses on emotional self-regulation and reducing triggers. So this should be done as a team, not just with the one classroom teacher. Clear boundaries, rules, and consequences, that's a given for most classrooms. A focus on positive reinforcement. So once again, we're looking at reducing the negative view of the world for these students. Regularly checking in on students with trauma and recognizing signs of emotional distress. So knowing your students and recognizing when they're feeling distressed and taking action before it escalates. Selectively picking battles. These students may have more emotional regulation issues than other students, and knowing when it's a battle that's worth fighting and when it's not is very important. Small group instruction that allows students to feel a sense of control in their own learning environment. This is important for a lot of students with trauma background do not feel a sense of control in any aspect of their life. So small group instruction where they can participate and feel in control can be very valuable for their self-esteem. For more extensive information on current trauma-informed practice strategies, you can go to the Australian Childhood Foundation link below. So how can we apply this research? With the new information in mind, I'd like you to discuss with your partner what new strategies might you use in a situation like your experience shared in part 1. So what strategies might you use when a student with a trauma background is not responding to a typical classroom strategy you're using? So this involves reflecting on thinking and processes, which is a general capability in the Australian curriculum, and it also applies to the EITSL Standard 6.2. Engage in professional learning and improve practice. Understand the relevant and appropriate sources of professional learning for teachers. I'd now like to ask if any teachers here recognize that they currently have a student in their class with a trauma background that might benefit from trauma-informed practice strategies. If this is you, over the next 2 weeks, I'd like you to ask your partner to observe your class and provide feedback on your use of trauma-informed practice strategies. So this involves social management, which is a general capability in the Australian curriculum, and it also applies to the AITSL Standard 6.3, which is engage with colleagues and improve practice, which involves seeking and applying constructive feedback from other teachers to improve your teaching practices.
This is the end of the activities we prepared. Today, we shared our thoughts on how to support students suffering from trauma through 2 activities. We hope that everyone here could have a chance to consider an effective trauma-based procedure for supporting students through the activities today. Thank you for listening.